what I want to do today is to describe a couple of bodies of knowledge that address business analysis, and briefly talk about some of what they cover and some of their strengths and some of their issues. My intent is not to give you a full in-depth discussion or description of them, nor is it to dump on them unnecessarily. They're all valuable, and they all have strengths, they all have weaknesses. Then I want to introduce you to the BAseBOK model and some of its concepts and rationale, and hopefully you'll find some of the advantages of it, and introduce some of the knowledge areas. So those of you who may be familiar with BABOK from IIBA, it's in this country probably the best known and major body of knowledge dealing with business analysis. And this is the structure of it. There are two main, not main, but two overriding knowledge areas, the planning and monitoring and the underlying competencies. And then there are two competencies, elicitation and requirements management and communication, that are then directly involved with the other three knowledge areas: enterprise analysis, requirements analysis, and solution assessment and validation. And you can see that the elicitation is primarily occurring in the enterprise analysis and requirements analysis, and then the products of those are being assessed and validated. The requirements communication means capturing, writing things, and managing them. Now, BABOK says that the knowledge areas are not life cycle phases. But frankly, it's real easy for people to interpret them that way. And let me emphasize that bodies of knowledge can be interpreted in a variety of ways, sometimes appropriately, sometimes not appropriately, sometimes intended, sometimes not intended. One of the things that BABOK does is it says that enterprise analysis is a pre-project activity that primarily involves senior management defining business needs and the product, system, software to meet the need and the objectives that those needs represent. Okay. That in turn it leads to initiating a project to accomplish whatever the enterprise analysis has been defined needs to be done. In the enterprise analysis as defined by BABOK, the business analyst often is not involved. And if the business analyst is involved, it's kind of usually secondarily simply to document the needs that the senior management has defined. It doesn't have to be that way, but in practice that's a fairly common thing. And often, and much to the chagrin of many business analysts, they often are not involved when the project is getting defined initially. The major business analyst or activity is the elicitation during the project. And elicitation is gathering stakeholders' descriptions of the required product, system, or software, and then what is called requirements analysis, which the business analyst also is the active participant in defining features and usage requirements of the product, system, or software. Okay. So that's the typical approach. Now, just a couple of things to realize here. BABOK identifies various types of requirements. They identify business requirements, which they say are identified in enterprise analysis. Stakeholder requirements are described as the needs of a particular class of stakeholder. and how they will interact with the solution, and use cases describing the usage of the product or system are a common format that is used for this, and that's done in the requirements analysis knowledge area. And then the solution requirements of the product, system, or software are defined in terms, during requirements analysis, once again, are defined in terms of functional requirements, which includes use cases, and non-functional requirements, quality factors, and so forth. And then there are what are called transition requirements, which relate to the implementing the systems, and that's part of the solution assessment and validation. So BASBOK largely reflects conventional requirements practices. And one of those, unfortunately, it doesn't have to be, but it's often carried out this way, is that elicitation is often simply largely passive, taking dictation. What do you want? Let me write it down. Okay. When you're taking that dictation from senior executives, it's about the business objectives. When you're taking it from those who are more directly involved, it's about the software features. Okay. Now, for anybody who wants to read an article that I wrote that gets into this more fully, have one on that was featured on Requirements Network group, and it's called "Should BASBOK Include Shorthand?" And then the major part of the business analysis focuses on the analysis on the product, system, or software. The analysis is focusing on what's going to be built. Okay. And not surprisingly, I'm sure you're all familiar with creep, and it occurs and it continues to occur even in organizations that have embraced BASBOK or other methods. Okay. It's not an indictment, it's simply a fact. Okay. BASBOK, no doubt, can help, but it by itself is not a panacea. Nothing is. Another thing that often happens is that when creep occurs, it's blamed on the users not knowing what they want. Some of you may be familiar with PMBOK, the Project Management Body of Knowledge from the Project Management Institute, and it talks about several project management processes, including initiating, in which project charter is developed and stakeholders are identified, and planning, when the project plan is developed and requirements are collected and scope is defined. Okay. In the project integration management, that's when charters and project plans and so forth are developed. Okay. And this is what developing a project charter is described as: the process of developing a document that formally authorizes a project or a phase and documenting initial requirements that satisfy the stakeholders' needs and expectations. Okay. So it initiates the project, and it's authorized by somebody, and usually triggers the creation of a needs analysis, business case, or description of the situation the project will address. So out of this comes a statement of work, and it references the needs. The scope description documents the characteristics of the product that the project will undertake to create. Should also document the relationship between the products and services being created and business need that the project will address. Okay? And then a strategic plan comes out of that, and a business case, okay, helps determine whether or not the project is worth the required investment. Okay? The business